Hello and welcome everyone to the Wild Card Weekend Betting and DFS Preview Show. I'll be your host for this series. We'll be here each and every week of the playoffs. I'm Josh Larky. I'm joined by our Associate Director of Fantasy and Betting, Ryan Reynolds, and our Head of DFS, Jordan Vanek. We're going to be breaking down all 6 games on the slate. We'll talk about different betting angles, different matchups, different DFS plays. We're going to make it actionable. We're going to make it interesting. And I promise you'll learn at least something for each game from one of the three of us. Let's get right down to it. The marquee game, the double revenge game. Rams at Lions. Lions are currently 3-point favorites. The game total is a whopping 51.5. Ryan, the double revenge game. There's going to be a lot of action. Has there been any line movement at all so far with this?
Yeah, it opened as Lions -3.5 and moved to Lions -3 within like half a day. The total stayed the same, but people like the Rams, and I think they should.
I like that. Ryan, we bet on Matthew Stafford earlier this week. He faces a Lions team that's allowing the second most passing yards per game to quarterbacks, yet they've allowed the fewest rushing yards per game to running backs. Is this the upset you're most confident in? Is Stafford against this Lions pass defense?
From a betting perspective, I definitely liked it at Rams +3.5. I'm not as interested at +3. We bet on good lines here. We're not really looking to force plays, but I think this is a coin flip game essentially, where the Rams have more pedigree and more experience in these situations. So they'd be the least surprising team that has an upset victory this week.
Jordan, Matthew Stafford's going to be very popular in DFS for obvious reasons. What I think people want to know is, how are you going to handle Kyren Williams this week? He should be pretty popular. Is he a one-off play, or are you going to actually stack him with Stafford in some of your lineups?
For me, Kyren would be a one-off play because of the salary of him at 7,300 on DraftKings. Overall, though, I don't have a lot of interest in Kyren Williams. I do believe that this Detroit Lions team is going to prevent them from running, because when the Rams run it well, Stafford and everything just opens up for that offense. You got to take away something from them, and I don't think you can necessarily take away his arm. And also, we've seen Stafford throw multiple interceptions throughout his career. He's a guy that forces things. I would much rather bet on that than having Kyren run all over you.
I like that. Now, Jordan, another popular one is Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. You've got 30 seconds. Make the case if you had to only play one of them with Stafford.
It's Cooper Kupp. Stafford, pedigree with him in the playoffs. Puka Nacua has not faced this type of, what's the word? Oh, use like coverage of like physicality. Playoff football is just always different. And the one thing about the Lions is they just got CJ Gardner-Johnson back. They're finally healthy from top to bottom on that side of the ball. I think this is a spot where the Lions defense is going to be underrated based on that total that I'm seeing at 51.5. I think they force a few turnovers against this team, and I think Cooper Kupp out of the two is going to have the biggest game because he's the one that Stafford has been with in the playoffs and continues to get it done.
I agree there. I think it's amazing how contrarian it is to prefer Cooper Kupp right now. All these playoff best ball tournaments, pretty much anything you're looking at, Puka Nacua is so clearly, so obviously the guy that you should play with Stafford. And I'm with you. I think Cooper Kupp actually makes more sense. Now, Ryan, Jared Goff, he's playing in Detroit when we're looking at the other side of this game. We've talked before about how crazy his home road splits are. Last year in 9 home games, Goff threw 23 touchdowns and just 3 picks, averaging 275 passing yards per game at home. This year, he averaged 280 yards per game at home. The touchdown interception ratio was still 19-6. His quarterback rating last year at home was 109. This year, it's 108. He's essentially Mahomes at home. However, tight end Sam Laporte is probably not playing this week. He's had arguably the best rookie tight end season in many, many decades. How do you see the Lions pass attack playing out in this game?
Well, first, Josh, when you compared Jared Goff to Patrick Mahomes, my skin crawled a little bit. So I'm trying to recover from that real quick. But, Goff's a California guy. He's good in clean pockets. Definitely a dome guy. This matchup for him is solid because the Rams, they're Aaron Donald, but they don't really have a significant pass rush. So I could see Goff shredding these guys. And like Jordan said, I do think Detroit's defense is a little bit more live this week than they normally are, where I have this game as like a very slight under. But yeah, if Goff had, 280 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns, it really wouldn't shock me at all.
Jordan got a tough decision at running back. Is it Jahmyr Gibbs or is it David Montgomery from Detroit? This offense has kind of flowed through the run game. Who is it this week?
I'm going with Jahmyr Gibbs. Throughout the year, the explosive runner just has been better from a yards per carry metric, and just like watching the games, like Kenneth Walker broke off a few big runs. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey's a whole other beast, but overall, we've seen the speed at running back hurt the Rams defense a lot more than the physicality of the David Montgomery thumper type running back.
I like it. Guys, before we move to Dolphins Chiefs, reminder to everyone listening, we have our new partnership with Better, BETR, Better, co-founded by Jake Paul. All I know is that every single business venture, anything he's ever done at this point, has succeeded. I looked, he's actually younger than I am. That was embarrassing to find out. Ryan, I'm not going to comment on that, but you and I have some catching up to do. So good for Jake Paul, good for Better. And the three of us will be co-authoring an article giving out some picks for their more or less fantasy game. That will come out on the site, the33team.com this afternoon. You might be like, Josh, I hear about promos all the time. Usually I say no to them. Why Better? Well, first off, I think this platform is simply better than a lot of their competitors. The interface looks great, but more importantly for many out there, you simply want financial incentives to ever sign up for a new platform. And we've got one. Better offers a deposit match of 100% up to $500. That is 5 times the industry standard. That's 5 times better than Underdog. That's 5 times better than Prize Picks. You've ever used those platforms, you might as well hop into Better. Promo code 33rd team, all one word, 8 characters, 33rd team. Promo code 33rd team, you get that 100% deposit match up to $500 for Better. And the three of us will have that co-authored article on the site later today for free. You can read that, figure out how you want to create your first entry slip. Ryan, did you do the deposit match?
Yeah, I put $500 and I have 1,000. They matched it for 1,000. I like getting the best value possible at all times. So I love the fantasy alternatives to these kind of situations. So I'm a better guy now myself.
Nice. Life is also better when we get fun AFC matchups. What a segue. Dolphins at the Chiefs. Chiefs, 4.5-point favorites. Game totals at 44, much lower than Lions Rams, but 44 is actually, when we look at games this year, probably on the healthier end, to be completely honest. Ryan, it's going to be freezing. Any line movement in this game since it opened?
Yeah, it opened at Chiefs -3.5. It's moved up to -4.5, which, I think makes sense. I would actually have it in the middle at -4.
I mentioned it's going to be cold. Temperatures in the single digits. Wind chill is going to make it feel like -10 to -15. Tua Tagovailoa is a Miami quarterback. In college, he was not playing in the cold either. Are you concerned about him? This should be, I did some rough calculations. Seems like it'll be about 20 degrees colder than any NFL game he's played in before.
Yeah, I'm actually concerned about both teams. I lived in Minneapolis for a few years, and they played the Seahawks outdoors in a playoff game where it was -9, and I literally went outside that day, breathed in, texted everyone I knew, bet the under. So, it's going to rock hard football. Is going to negatively impact the kicking game big time, negatively impact the passing game to a degree. I think it hurts Tua probably more than Mahomes, but yeah, this is not a great situation for these two teams.
We currently have an article on the 33team.com, some best bets for this weekend, and we have a bet against Tua. Check out that article to figure out what it is. But on the other end, Jordan, you've been a Tua guy, I'd say quite successfully. What he's done since his rookie year has been much more impressive than I think anyone imagined. How do you expect the Chiefs defense to play against him? And what does his path to success look like for this one?
So in their first matchup, they played a lot of like 2 safeties back, and then situationally they would bring a safety down into the box and give them a man coverage look where their guys kind of press them and actually got physical with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I think we're going to see a lot of that in this matchup as well, where it's situational usage of like a 1 safety deep, which is what Tua finds for these explosive plays. And they're going to try to get physical with them off the line of scrimmage because we're in the snow, we're in the very frigid, cold temperatures. It's going to be hard to just run around, let alone beat another person in front of you that's trying to hold you at the line of scrimmage. So for me, I expect that to be the defense. And then for Tua's just kind of overall path of success for this game, it's just sustaining drives. Like, make the simple throw. Don't try to force things. And then on the flip side, extend 3 to 5 plays this game. He doesn't need to extend every play. He doesn't need to be Patrick Mahomes and outdo him, but he needs to be able to extend at least 3 to 5 plays that result in sustaining the drive and then just going down the field. I do not expect him to have a monster game. I do not expect him to be someone that's going to throw for the multiple touchdowns, but manage the game and allow your defense to break the rhythm, because I think they have like 4 different guys that have never played a snap for them starting on the defense line this week.
Yeah, we'll talk about that really shortly. Guys, I'm talking wild card weekend betting and DFS with Ryan Reynolds and Jordan Vanek. Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter, Jordan Vanek DFS on Twitter. Jordan, right back to you. Raheem Mostert's been practicing all week. He's officially listed as questionable. I think we all know that he's going to play. Why would he be practicing and not suit up for a playoff game? Mostert or Devon Achane in DFS. Similar to Gibbs Montgomery, this is probably the other big decision point where we have 2 star running backs on a high-powered offense.
I lean Achane in this one because Mostert wasn't able to get the edge against the Chiefs defense last time. The Dolphins have been running a lot of horizontal running right now, and Achane is the one that has more speed, and I think he can get upfield better. I actually think Jeff Wilson sees work as well. I think they're going to have to go with a 3-headed monster and just keep, being physical with them and being multidimensional. And I think they're going to use a lot of sets where both Achane and Mostert, or Achane and Jeff Wilson, are out there this weekend.
Let's turn to the other side of this game. Ryan, Patrick Mahomes is coming off a season where he averaged career lows in passing yards per game, yards per attempt, touchdown rate, interception rate. The whole offense has felt a lot less scary, a lot less exciting than past years. The silver lining here, as Jordan started to allude to, Dolphins defense is hurt. Starting edge rushers, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, they're gone. Edge, Andrew Van Ginkel just got put on IR last week. That's 3 guys from one position group gone. Linebacker Jerome Baker's on injured reserve. Cornerback Xavier Howard is officially doubtful. Do you have hopes that Mahomes, Andy Reid can right the ship? I see Jordan just shaking his head as I list those injuries. I know he's a Dolphins guy living in Florida at this point. Can the Chiefs right the ship? They're playing at least point like 60% backups on this defense.
Yeah, it's tough, especially the pass rush. If you give Patrick Mahomes all day, he's going to cream you. Xavier Howard, I think, would matter more against other teams that have more dynamic skill players, but that's still obviously negative. One thing that I would love to see out of the Chiefs would be more, a return to the screen game, more passes to running backs, and if they do lean into that a little bit more, Jerome Baker's absence will be something they can exploit there. And one thing I'll say here in general for the Chiefs is, I don't remember which run this was for the Colts, but for one of at least they got to the Super Bowl. Peyton Manning's offense didn't really crush it in the playoffs. Their defense overachieved. I think if the Chiefs are going to make any noise here, that's the path here where they score 24 points a game, give up 20. And then, you have Patrick Mahomes late in games where he can score to win. That's their path here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ryan, you mentioned a return to the screen game. Running back Isaiah Pacheco's averaged over 4 receptions per game his last 4 contests. Looks like they might have heard you. You've been pretty loud and clear about that for most of this year. When we look at the pass game, it's pretty bleak. Jordan, Travis Kelce looked every bit of 34 years old for the second half of this year. How should we be stacking Mahomes in DFS?
So I'm worried. I'm focused on the receivers. I'm keeping it simple. Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce there. Vic Fangio, with the losses they've had to the defensive line, has started to play a lot more cover one, a lot more. We're just blitzing and we're going to come after you. I don't know if Rashee Rice is warranted the travel of Jalen Ramsey. I feel like Ramsey's just going to play the long side of the field just because of his ability to flat out cover ground that most people are incapable of, or even potentially traveling to Travis Kelce in the slot if need be, if he's working their linebacker. So if I'm stacking Mahomes, it's a double, and I'm keeping it simple with Rashee Rice and Kelce, because I think Pacheco's got to be a little bit of a blocker here. I feel like, Vic Fangio is going to be blitzing the house, and they're going to come after him. If they're not getting home, Rice and Kelce will win down the field.
Let's turn to the lowest game total here. It's Steelers at Bills. Bills are 10-point favorites, despite the game total being only at 36. Ryan, there's been some line movement in this one. Or I guess game total movement at the very least. Talk to us about this and how weather should massively affect this.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about maybe 30-mile-an-hour sustained winds. A couple of years ago in the regular seasons, the Bills played the Patriots in Buffalo, where the Patriots threw the ball 3 times in that game in a similar environment.
Yes.
So if things keep trending in that direction, passing games are going to be impacted. I'm actually a little surprised the Bills opened at -9.5, and it's moved to 10, where I actually think the weather situation helps Pittsburgh, if anything.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised about that as well. For people that don't want to do the math, 10-point spread, 36 points implies 13 for the Steelers, 23 for the Bills. That is a pretty wild blowout to predict for the playoffs. Now, Ryan, you mentioned 3 pass attempts from Mac Jones from a couple of years back. How are we going to be betting against Mason Rudolph this weekend? I think you had a creative angle here.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at yards first, but we talked about this. The yards are crazy. It's like -170. But there's 3 things that I love about betting. We ended up taking Mason Rudolph's under attempts at 27.5, and there's 3 things I love about it. First is, again, the weather. Once winds start getting a 25-mile-an-hour plus sustained, they're going to negatively impact games. 2, this team's going to lean on their running game as long as they can. And if, again, the weather, it's probably going to keep this game closer, which helps. And 3, and this is my favorite angle of any under bet on Mason Rudolph, if they fall behind and he struggles, Kenny Pickett's going in. So I think there's a number of paths to this going under here.
Pickett is healthy. Jordan, we just talked about how the Steelers are projected for 13 points. Theoretically, you're being held hostage, and they say, we'll let you go, but you have to put a Steelers receiver into your DFS lineup. Deontay Johnson or George Pickens. The receptions unders are so heavily juiced to the under in the betting markets. People hate these guys. Who would you have to roll with here?
I would have to go with Pickens. He's had the same amount of targets as Deontay Johnson with Mason Rudolph back there. He has double the yards. And that's with Deontay Johnson having a 71-yard touchdown against the Baltimore Ravens. I know Pickens blew up against the Bengals. Bills are a lot better than that. I don't want either, but if I had to choose, it's definitely George Pickens there.
All right, I've got to taste your question here because you're actually a little more passionate about this one. The Steelers have really just run the damn ball for the second half of this year. It doesn't really matter what kind of game script. They are going to be running the ball. It's a bad weather game. Do we have a preference here since Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren should both merit some DFS consideration?
It's Jaylen Warren for me, and Jaylen Warren's probably one of my favorite plays on the entire slate. I know what Vegas is telling us. I know 13 points implied total playing a running back when it's a 10-point spread. Nothing of that sort sounds great. However, the Buffalo Bills, they play their nickel or dime package at the highest rate in the entire NFL, meaning they don't have 3 linebackers on the field. Their best run stuffer at the linebacker position, he's on IR. That's Matt Milano. Their next best guy is on the injury report right now in Dotson. They allow a lot of yards before contact. It's just a matter of being able to get to that second level with some speed. Najee Harris has no speed, and these safeties will be able to get to his ankles, while Jaylen Warren, when he's faced a team that runs nickel package or dime package, he's averaging 5.7 yards per carry, and that's been throughout the entire season. He's just explosive with these teams try to go light because he can also play as the power back, the guy that can be physical with you, but has so much more speed than Harris right now.
Yeah, I think one thing that people don't realize who don't watch games, Jaylen Warren's big. I think a lot of people think he's small just because Najee Harris is bigger and Warren catches passes. Warren himself is nearly 220. All right, we talked about the Steelers slightly positively. Let's turn back to the negative side. Ryan, there's no TJ Watt. He's already been ruled out. We have third stringer Mason Rudolph. This defense could be in some bad positions. How are the Steelers going to have to adapt, being that they're playing Josh Allen and company without their best player?
Well, the thing with Watt is, and this happened last year, I think he missed 5-6 weeks where they were a bottom 10 defense without him and a top 5 defense with him. And the reason for this is twofold. 1, disruption is what matters in the passing game. He's one of the best pass rushers in the league, maybe the best pass rusher in the league at this point. And 2, you have to game plan for guys like that. The example I always use Baltimore is they treat it like a pitcher would treat a hitter, giving them different looks all the time. They'll run a trap at him, double team them, chip them, let him come free and have Jackson step up, just make him feel uncomfortable the whole game. Without him, you don't have to worry about that at all. You can use your resources in other ways. Cam Hayward's a guy who's going to see more double teams now. And, Alex Highsmith's a good complementary player, but if he gets any kind of DJ Watt treatment on 3rd and 12 type situations, entirely different ballgame for the Steelers defense.
I like how you laid that out. Jordan, this once predictable Bills passing game has been pretty hard to predict in recent weeks. Do you have any interest in Josh Allen? It's a weather game total's low, but he did just set the NFL record for rushing touchdowns in a season by a quarterback. He and Jalen Hurts set the record this year at 15 touchdowns. Do you have any interest in Allen? And if you do, who should we stack him with?
I have a little bit of interest because of that rushing upside that you just talked about. Allen can play superhero ball, and if we're telling ourselves that this game's going to be close, he's going to play plenty of it. You mentioned the rushing touchdowns. He's just gotten so much more design work in the running game with Brady as the play caller. The player I would stack him with is actually Dalton Kincaid. The Steelers are a team that struggle with slot tight ends. It's one of the things that they've dealt with all season long because of the injuries they've had at linebacker. Now you're telling me he's going to have more time to throw. And we saw like Kincaid kind of have some big plays here and there throughout the season. It's a rookie spot. I know it's not normally where I would go in the playoffs, but I'll just keep it simple and play both of them and hope Kincaid gets them down the field and also pays off that premium position of the tight end on DFS. And then Josh Allen just finds his way to multiple rushing touchdowns.
I like that. Before we move to Browns Texans, we have a free Discord. You should check it out. Join, become one of the 4,000 members already in there. It's linked in all of our articles on the33rdteam.com. It's linked in my Twitter at JLarky tweets. You can chat with the three of us, ask us questions, DFS plays, prop bets you're interested in. Just want to chat some football. We'll be in there throughout the week. Browns Texans, guys. Texans 2-point favorites. Game total's 44.5. Ryan, how has this line moved since it opened?
Opened at opened at Browns -2, moved to Browns -2.5, back down to -2. Usually the hook matters, especially when it's at 3. This is like a 2 to 4% difference. So I obviously want to get value whenever I want to bet on anything, but this is less concerning than it would be if the line was 3 here.
Jordan, the year was 2023 for this past NFL season. Joe Flacco, of all people, led the league with 323 passing yards per game. Houston's allowing the 3rd most yards per attempt to opposing quarterbacks, yet they're allowing the fewest yards per carry to running backs. It's kind of like Detroit. It feels like a pass funnel defense. Flacco's passing yards prop is over 270 yards. That's nearly the Dak Prescott levels for this week. Seems like Flacco's popular from everything I've seen in DFS. How are you going to stack him where we're obviously going to have to play Amari Cooper in a lot of those lineups? Who's the double stack partner to at least try to get a little different in our lineups?
So I'll add 2 things here. Flacco is number 1 in the NFL on play action yards per attempt. He's averaging almost 13 yards per attempt off play action. The Texans are the worst team in the NFL at defending play action passes. They're just overcommitting to that run game that has been atrocious for 5-6 years. That D'Amico Ryan's just playing a physical brand of football. The one thing I'll also note about last matchup where Amari Cooper went for 230 yards, Derek Stingley was not on the side of Amari Cooper for any of those passes. That was always Steven Nelson or other corners on that side of the field. Derek Stingley never really got the chance to match up with Amari Cooper. That's the adjustment for D'Amico Ryans from the standpoint of how do they limit him a little bit. And when doing so, Elijah Moore is the player that I expect to step up with this Cleveland Browns team. If Steven Nelson is going to be matched up with him, Flacco's just playing the numbers game. It's like whoever has the best matchup, I'm going there. I don't care who it is. He's trusted Elijah Moore when he was with the Jets, and now a little bit with Cleveland. Obviously, he's coming off the concussion. But Cedric Tillman was just ruled out for that game, I believe. So Elijah Moore for me is guys in a full-time role in a spot where if they don't move Stingley to Cooper's side, I'll be surprised from a D'Amico Ryan standpoint.
I like that. The Chalks double stack is going to be Flacco, Cooper, David, and Njoku. Yep. We're going to do a little Flacco, Cooper, Elijah Moore. If you want to bet on Joe Flacco in the props market, I know it's only a 5-game sample, but all he does is pass at a high volume. We really like him to have over 36.5 pass attempts. In his 5 starts, 4 of them, he reached 42 pass attempts. The one that he didn't was against the Jets. He still threw for over 300 yards. He just didn't have to pass very much. because they kind of knew that Trevor Siemian and the Jets wouldn't be able to keep pace. I'd be pretty shocked if the Browns took their foot off the gas at any point in the pass game when you're facing CJ Stroud on the other end. As we mentioned earlier, the Texans defense has been getting carved up this year. Would make sense that if they're 4-1 in these Flacco starts, let's just keep doing what's worked. And this offense should be extremely pass-centric again. Now, Ryan, you've watched every snap of every game since 2014. You still live to talk about it. Detail Flacco and this offense in general style of play, where they've lost both starting offensive tackles. They've had other offensive line injuries as well, yet they continue to thrive with heavy passing volume. How has it actually come together when you watch these games?
Yeah, it boils down to three things for me. Like Jordan said, Flacco's a professional quarterback. Lots of play action. He's been successful there. Part two, again, Flacco's a professional quarterback. He's going with the ball where the matchup dictates more often than not. One of the things that has surprised me is he's made a few really good plays out of structure, which is, kind of like, let's see Jordan nodding his head. It's like, whoa, dude, like I didn't know you still had that in you. God bless you. And then fourth, we talked about this specifically with the Bears game. The running game's been very ineffective since Flacco took over. They've gone to extreme volume in some games against the Bears. We talked about, like I said, if they go to traditional muddy game plan with a backup quarterback, they lose that game 17-3. But they just let Flacco let it rip all game. It resulted in a few big plays that carried drives. And, that's the thing here is which side of Flacco are you going to get? Are you going to get multiple turnovers where they end up losing the game because of it? Or is he going to get 2 or 3 big spike plays to a guy like Elijah Moore, Mari Cooper, David Njoku? Flacco's always loved tight ends. He is probably the best athletic tight end he's ever had in his career. So that's what this game boils down to me for the most part.
Yeah, Ryan, we talked about this a tiny bit on our Tuesday show when we previewed just the general playoff picture. Flacco's 5-game sample, just a 5-game sample, but over 17 games, it would have come out to 27 interceptions thrown. Definitely a unique style of hero ball. We've got the new Jameis Winston. Now, Ryan, I'm going right back to you. CJ Stroud is the current favorite to win Offensive Rookie of the Year the last time the odds were out. Funny enough, when you look at qualified passers, which takes out Flacco's 5-game sample, the guy on the other end of this, CJ Stroud, led the league officially with 274 passing yards per game. Stroud was concussed when these teams first played earlier this year. Case Keenum and Davis Mills combined for just 211 passing yards on 49 attempts. That's 4 yards per pass attempt. How much better do you expect Stroud and company to play now that they've had a little more time to game plan? They've already seen this opponent. And again, it's CJ Stroud instead of Case Keenum getting benched for Davis Mills.
Before I answer your question, Josh, quick thought on the Offensive Rookie of the Year market. A couple years ago when it was Justin Herbert versus Justin Jefferson, I believe Jefferson had the best or second best rookie wide receiver campaign ever. Herbert still beat him with what was the best quarterback campaign. Stroud and Puka are in the same situation. I think Puka has a shot, but Stroud should still win that award. Now, to answer your question, I think, the reason CJ Stroud's even here is because Davis Mills couldn't cut it as an every week starting quarterback. The difference between him and Case Keenum versus CJ Stroud already, we've talked about this a few times, Josh, when we were doing our draft analysis. I comped CJ Stroud to Dak Prescott. I think he's already there, which is pretty remarkable. Mm-hmm. My concern here is, and I'm very curious to see what Jordan has to say here. The Browns perimeter corners are like one of the best perimeter corner duos in the league. And, if we're being honest here, the Texans, Stroud's really elevated this pass catching group. They don't really have a ton of great weapons. So obviously it makes a big difference both in terms of ceiling and stability, but this is a really tough matchup against one of the league's best defenses.
Jordan, just like Flacco, Amari Cooper, any Stroud lineup in DFS pretty much legally has to include Nico Collins at this point. I'll also note, as of yesterday, Wednesday, Noah Brown still hasn't practiced in any capacity the past couple weeks. If he suits up, is he the guy that you pair with Stroud and Collins, or is there someone else that you want to look to for these Stroud double stacks?
So for Stroud's ceiling, it would have to come from Noah Brown. But Brian alluded to it. The Cleveland Browns corners are different. Nico Collins' average yards of separation throughout the whole season, according to ESPN's Next Gen stats, was 3.0. So he's getting a ton of center separation. In this game with Davis Mills at quarterback, that was 1.5. I watched a lot of that game. He's not going to be able to win consistently, but there is one injury that just transpired that I saw where Denzel Ward, I guess, hurt his knee in practice today. It's something to monitor.
Ooh.
That would be a significant loss to their defense, but it's still not enough for me to go away from them. Martin Emerson has dealt with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. He went and locked down Garrett Wilson for majority of their game against the Jets. Like, that guy can also go out and cover Nico Collins. Like, we saw Nico Collins just last year. Like, we never talked about him in the phrase of you have to stack this guy with him. I know he's made tremendous strides as a receiver. This is not the matchup for him. Last week against the Colts, phenomenal. Young corners, scheme that's just simple. Not one of them that is going to be able to really be physical and dominant with him. And also on the flip side, the Texans' offensive line has been tremendous all year. They were getting dominated by that Browns defensive line. I can only imagine that gets higher pressure in the playoffs with Myles Garrett and company coming after Stroud.
I like that. Yeah, the Browns defensive line pressured quarterbacks at the second highest rate in the NFL this year, behind only Miami. We already talked about Miami's injury, so I think at this point we can probably say that the Browns have arguably the best defensive line currently. Probably them and the Cowboys. Ryan, we've talked about some interesting defensive angles here. Do you have any interest in either of these defenses for DFS where Flacco throws picks and, as we just talked about on the other side, Browns defensive line pressures quarterbacks at a high rate?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can play Cleveland against anyone for the most part. It's just a matter of, fitting them salary-wise. I will definitely play Houston, probably with Devin Singletary in one lineup and without him in another. Because like you said, Joe Flacco could have 3 interceptions and take 3 sacks and maybe give up a defensive score in this game. That wouldn't really surprise me a lot. So Houston will definitely be in my player pool.
Guys, if you want more DFS content, Jordan's DFS piece breaking down all 6 of these games even more in depth will hit the33rd-team.com either tonight or tomorrow morning. It will be free to read. You have to check that out if you're playing DFS. And we have to talk about Eagles at Bucks. The Buccaneers are 3-point underdogs at home. Game totals at 44. Ryan, this game has 2 teams headed in the wrong direction. Eagles secondary can't stop anyone. Buccaneers offense just scored 2 touchdowns over their final 2 games against the Saints and the Panthers. What do you do in situations like this from a handicapping perspective, and how has the public handled this spread in total to this point?
Well, that's a good question. See, the Eagles have free fall. They've lost 5 of their last 6. It's been a disaster on multiple fronts. Secondary has been a problem all year. But, raw material-wise, they still have an excellent quarterback, or at least a highly capable quarterback. Great skill group, premium lines on both sides of the balls. They just need one game to get back on track. And with Tampa, Tampa, to their credit, to Baker Mayfield's credit, they finished the year 5-1, won the division no one wanted to win. But, Carolina, the Falcons, the Packers, the Jaguars, the Panthers again. Do I really care about any of those wins? I don't. I think everyone thinks Philly's done, and this is an opponent that Philly could shred like they did in week 3 earlier in the year.
I like that take. Jordan, we're going to cut to it. We talked about it. These secondaries are both exploitable. We've got 4 big receivers in this game. They all have like pretty high ceilings at this point with AJ Brown, Devonta Smith from the Eagles, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin on the Bucks. Brown and Smith are slightly banged up. That's worth mentioning, but still it's the Bucks secondary. Do you have supreme confidence in any of these pieces? Since I think all of them merit being obviously stacked, but just as one-offs in DFS lineups as well.
Mike Evans for me. This is an Eagles secondary that is just they can't cover, and I don't think Slay should shadow Mike Evans. I think you have to trust Bradbury, and with the change of play calling, like I don't know, is it Sean Desai? Is it Matt Patricia calling plays out there? Patricia does one thing that just irritates me. He'll be in cover 4 type of like an umbrella scheme for majority of the game, and like they'll defend decently well, but then random moments we're pressing, we're playing cover 1, and he's doing it without Slay on the field for the most part, and as a result, teams are just winning over the top. Like how that Seattle game, how do you go to cover 1 at that point in the game and let Bradbury play one-on-one with JSN? I don't know why you do it. Cover 4 has been working pretty much the whole game. Like DK Metcalf had a ridiculous catch on the sideline prior to that, but like other than that, you've been pretty good all game long, and then now all of a sudden he runs it. So for me, I think the big play to Mike Evans is going to be there in this game. It's just going to be a matter of when. Mike Evans, I believe, dropped like 2 or 3 passes in their first game because it was like a rainy, wet type of atmosphere in Tampa. Hopefully they avoid that this time around. And as a result, you see Mike Evans get back going. And as like overall, the offense just sees a spark because he's playing well.
Ryan, we talked a few weeks ago. Sorry, Bucs fans. Baker Mayfield's probably played well enough at this point to at least merit extension consideration. It seems like if the Bucs win, it's pretty much a lock that some kind of extension happens. That's how I'm kind of viewing it? Is that how you see it at this point? Because he seems like the next Daniel Jones type in terms of, oh, you know what? I think he's still there.
Oh man, I think they're in not quite Geno Smith territory. I think it's kind of the same situation where, like, yeah, I mean, you got to bring him back. You won 9 games. You're not going to be able to draft a quarterback. Like, they're stuck with that. So do they franchise him like Washington did with Kirk Cousins years ago to see what happens? Or do you extend him like Seattle did with Geno Smith, which right now they're probably wishing they didn't do that. And that's,
yes,
I think I'd rather franchise tag him and just eat the money.
Yeah, I think tying yourself to as few years of Baker Mayfield as possible at this point is probably the right move. Jordan, Rachaad White, DeAndre Swift, both have had huge games this year for DFS. Both have really tough matchups this week. Do you have any interest in either of them when we do have some other running backs with pretty favorable matchups on the slate?
I definitely like the other running backs on the slate overall, but if I had to choose between the two, it's Rachaad White just because Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is one of those guys that aggravates me every time they get to the 1 yard line. Kelsey talked about it on their podcast. He just goes in the huddle. He's like, "I'm sorry, man. Like, Swift, you got tackled at the 1, so sorry. It's not your touchdown." And also, the one thing about Philly's run defense in recent weeks that's been under the radar is like they haven't really been that good. I don't know why. I think Baldy was talking about how Jordan Davis is just a waste of space at this point. Like, straight up saying he has no effort in the run game and like all like bashing him. And for the most part, like I've seen some of their games, they're not really defending the run all that well. So if you're going to do it, I think White has to be. White's been all the workhorse all year long, one of the more heaviest touches, heaviest usage of any running back in the NFL. And I know if they get to the 1 yard line, like a Baker QB sneak will be passed off for a Rachaad White carry.
Before we hit the final game, Packers at Cowboys, a lot of fun angles there. Reminder, we are sponsored by Better, BETR. Promo code 33rd team, all one word, just 33rd team, 8 characters. Get that 100% deposit match up to $500. You put in 500, you now have 1,000. That is unheard of in the picks apps, the fantasy games department. Promo code 33rd team. Packers, Cowboys. Cowboys 7-point favorites. Game total is just above 50 at 50.5. It joins Lions Rams as the other 50-point game here. Ryan, has there been any line movement in this one since it opened?
Yeah, it's bounced between Cowboys -7, Cowboys -7.5. I like Green Bay a little bit if you can get it at 7.5. Otherwise, I'm going to avoid this one against the spread.
Now, Jordan. Speaking of Jordan Love was sneakily second in the NFL this year. He had 32 passing touchdowns, despite having the youngest offense in the NFL, the youngest receiving core, and it being filled with injuries. I know that you were higher than pretty much anyone that I knew in this space on Dontavian Wicks. A lot of people literally hadn't heard of him until he started to blow up this year. And then you look and you go, wow, a 5th-round pick averaging 55 receiving yards a game over the second half of his rookie season. That's actually really, really good. You nailed that one. But this is a new week. Which Packers receiver are you going to look to in this matchup? It seems like all of them are going to suit up in some capacity for Wild Card weekend.
The safest player has to be Jaden Reed. It has to be him out of all of them, just because of the fact that like he just gets the most usage. Like they use him as like a running back almost. They've pretty much played him in like a Debo-esque type of role, but also allow him to be a little bit more of a receiver. And then Christian Watson, if that man is fully healthy, like Stephon Gilmore may be out in this matchup. And we saw him go for 3 touchdowns on Deron Bland last season. We also saw Deron Bland get absolutely destroyed by DK Metcalf because he's a bigger body dude. That height, weight, and speed is very difficult to handle. Christian Watson is all of that and more. The only Packers receiver I would say is I have no interest in is Romeo Doubs. I know he plays the most and he's been a part of the offense the most. He's not as good as the other three. I think their trio should be Wicks, Watson, and Reed going forward, but Doubs has obviously proved that he should be on the field for some capacity. Overall, though, it's Wicks or Reed. I mean Reed or Watson, and if one of them don't go, then I would slide in Wicks as the next option there.
We like Jaden Reed prop bets as well. Check out our best bets article to figure out what that bet is. And Jordan, I glanced. Stephon Gilmore says he will in fact play in this game. However, he also said he will be playing with a harness for his separated shoulder. I don't know enough about this injury to definitively say it, but I don't actually know if that's a plus for the Cowboys defense to have your cornerback playing all game with a separated shoulder. That sounds like a missed tackle or two could happen in this game. Ryan, Jordan, either of you have any thoughts on that? That sounds like it could potentially be a detriment.
I don't think so, just because of the fact that the speed of their front seven, like Gilmore isn't probably making that many tackles. But I guess if the Packers go to more like tight formations, that could be an issue. But overall, like the Cowboys play like strong safeties at linebacker right now. I'm more concerned about like physicality up the middle than I am toward the outside. They play a middle linebacker at defensive end, and they play two safeties at linebacker. It's a whole thing with their defense that makes no sense, but they're playing at such a high level still.
The one area I'd be concerned is with like a deep throw at a certain angle. If he can't lift his arm, that's probably my biggest concern.
We'll monitor that for this game. Everyone, next time there's a deep shot to Stephon Gilmore, let's look at that range of motion. Now, Ryan, on a more serious note, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, Joe Burrow. Those are the only quarterbacks this year to have a higher quarterback rating under pressure than Jordan Love. As you mentioned before, Jordan Love's 32 passing touchdowns were second in the NFL. But then on the other side, we have the Cowboys' defensive line, their pass rush, that's their strength. The Packers are pretty heavy underdogs. Only the Steelers are bigger underdogs. Do the Packers have any chance at an upset in this game where we might be able to say they're strength on strength with this surprisingly competent pass game and a very good Cowboys pass rush?
3 comments. First is, the only thing I care about in terms of Jordan Love's ability to manage pressure statistically is what were his numbers against relevant pass rushers like Dallas. The only one that I see on their schedule this year was the Steelers. So that's the only game I'd care about in this situation. And, I think Love's had an encouraging year, so it's not even a knock on him. Like Jordan said, physicality in the run game for Green Bay. The Cardinals beat Dallas this way. Buffalo beat Dallas this way. If the Packers are going to win this game, they have to do it on the ground, beat up Dallas interior. We've talked about this. Micah Parsons is small. Run right at him. That's something you can do with him. And then the thing is, Josh, this. The Packers actually have a very talented defense. They underachieve every year, basically. If they play their A game, they can give Dallas problems here. And in that scenario, run game plus their defense playing to their potential, I do actually think Green Bay could clip the Cowboys here.
Yeah, that gave me flashbacks. I'm a very frustrated Chargers fan each and every year, and I think I've heard that before. Wow, so much talent on defense. Why doesn't it actually come together? Jordan, let's talk about something a little more positive. Let's talk about CeeDee Lamb. He led the NFL with 135 receptions. That went along with 1,749 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns. He ran for 113 rushing yards as well. He scored twice on the ground as well. That's 14 total touchdowns. We're stacking him with Dak Prescott. But this is a beatable Packers secondary. It's a high game total. It's above 50. Who else are you looking to in DFS from this offense where you might go Dak, Lamb, and then somebody else as well?
I'm going to Jake Ferguson. And the reason here is because I think it kind of plays out similarly to the way their game played out last season, where Ryan is right. Like the Packers defense can come with their A game. The one thing the Packers don't give you is man coverage, which is what Dak Prescott needs to be explosive. Like he's not someone that is very explosive when it's just a team that's going to stay in zone and he has to constantly read and react to the scheme and not necessarily just relying on CeeDee Lamb's eventually going to get open. I can extend the play and things will go out that way. last year against the Packers, Tony Pollard ran for 115 yards. Dak Prescott threw the ball 47 times for only 265 yards. He threw 2 interceptions in that game. And the only 2 pass catchers that were of note were CeeDee Lamb, who had 11 for 150 and 2 touchdowns, and Dalton Schultz, who is just eating over the middle of the field. I'm sticking to that kind of concept. Brandon Cooks has interest of me just because he's that veteran player, but it's a spot where it's just zone coverage looks, and it's like CeeDee Lamb can do it all. He's honestly taken that next step into the elite tier of wide receivers. I believe I had him as like 6th. Kind of regret having him so low. I feel like he's past Diggs, and he's right up there with like a Devontae Adams type player. So this Packers defense is in trouble with him. But if I'm stacking Dak, it's with Jake Ferguson and CeeDee Lamb.
Ryan, this offseason, you predicted the Cowboys would win the division. They were around plus 200. They did. You bet on Dak Prescott at 40-1 odds mid-season to win MVP. He's probably not going to do it, but at one point, 4 weeks later, he was a co-favorite for the award. Your call's been pretty good for Dallas so far. How would you define success for Dak in this game where they're moving into the divisional round of the playoffs and you feel really, really good about how he's going to perform regardless of who he faces in the next round?
Well, first, Josh, I had a Twitter user tell me that I hate the Cowboys and I got every team in the NFC East wrong. I literally predicted the Cowboys to finish 12-5 and win the NFC East. Like, literally got it. Like, that just reminded me of that. With Dak, the MVP race, this is a fascinating MVP race this year because in terms of the stats that matter, which is rating, QBR, touchdowns, team success, and pick your kind of EPA. There's so many different variants of it. I'm not sure which one we should treat as the most important one, but usually it's EPA per play. Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott are the only quarterbacks that have really had an MVP caliber season. Josh Allen's kind of close. Lamar Jackson's actually 4th in that area. But, team success-wise and best player on the best team, Lamar Jackson's the guy, especially after the Dolphins game. So I'm curious to see how that all shakes out. But if you're a Lamar Jackson guy for MVP, you can't really be like a full-fledged data guy because it's not really there on that front. Now, to answer your question, Josh, what does a good game here look like for Dak Prescott? I think 24, 27 points is a game this team can win with or should win with. I could see, it's time Tony Pollard has a game. You can run on Green Bay. I'd love to see that. I'll play him a little in DFS. If you want to really let your hair down, like if Rico, what's his name? Rico Dowdle.
Dinwiddie is the point guard in the NBA.
Point guard in the NBA. I mean, he's looked explosive. If those guys split touches in this game, it wouldn't blow me away. But what I want to see out of Dak is the last 2 weeks, it's basically been him and CeeDee Lamb, and that's it. Let's spread it around a little bit more.
I like that. Guys, if you want to know exactly how Ryan's viewing these games, his expert picks and score predictions for all 6 playoff games is on the33rdteam.com. That will go up every Thursday throughout the playoffs. Make sure you check that out and find out some of his reasoning behind each of those. Guys, we made it to the end of the show. Covered all 6 games in some nice detail. People that want more detail, as we mentioned, they can check out Ryan's picks and predictions article. You can check out Jordan's DFS piece. Now, Jordan, we've talked about a lot of players, but I want one more. Give us some under-the-radar DFS option. As Ryan and I always like to say, nobody does better at the outlier plays than you for DFS, Jordan. Give us a random guy. I'm ready.
Jameson Williams. The Rams corners all season long have struggled on the perimeter with speed. There have been countless touchdowns that I could just remember in my head where Witherspoon gets there late because it's Josh Dobbs throwing a ball to Hollywood Brown. This is a spot for JMO down the field. Sam Laporta is probably not playing. I think he got ruled out, right?
He's not playing.
He hyperextended his knee really bad. They need somebody to kind of free up things. Jameson Williams obviously missed last week because he was a little banged up. This is a spot for him to get one deep on these Rams corners who are very beatable, and he has the talent to just win deep on them.
Ryan, let's end the show. Give us a bold take for this weekend's games.
Yeah, we can't go with the Rams anymore because everyone likes the Rams. So what I'm going to say is I think the Eagles offense, at least for 1 week, looks like it's supposed to. I think they score at least 27 points against the Buccaneers this week.
I like that. Guys, for myself, Josh Larky, from my co-hosts, Ryan Reynolds and Jordan Vanek from the 33rd team, from Better, promo code 33rd team. We're here for Wildcard Weekend. Thank you, everyone.